Her true story from Oregon. My daughter threw my suitcase and said, "You're holding us back, move out." So I left. Then froze the family account. She wanted freedom? I gave her a taste of it. She threw my suitcase like it was a sack of trash. It hit the front porch steps with a dull thud, bounced once, and came to rest by the dying azaleas I used to water every morning. I stared at it. Soft leather, faded burgundy, the same one I used when I moved in to help her raise her baby, back when she cried every night for sleep and every morning for strength. Now she just stood there, arms crossed, face sharp with something colder than anger. Indifference. "You're holding us back," she said. "Me, Kyle, the kids, all of us. You've made this house your prison, and we're done being your inmates." I blinked. No tears came. I was far past that. She wasn't done. "You have 3 days to leave. I've already talked to a locksmith." I looked down at the suitcase. One of the zippers was broken. She hadn't even bothered to close it fully. A corner of my folded sweater hung out like a tongue. I bent over slowly and picked it up. The handle creaked. My hands didn't shake, but hers had when she first asked me to move in. Back when Kyle was colicky, and she hadn't had a real paycheck in months. 3 days, I said quietly, standing upright. Her tone was clipped. "Don't make this harder than it is." "Harder for who?" "For all of us," she snapped. But the edge in her voice wasn't conviction. It was fear, of not having the last word, of being questioned, of losing control. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just walked past her down the steps, suitcase thudding behind me, each roll of the wheels a little quieter than the last. She didn't call after me. I stopped by the curb, pulled out my phone, dialed one number. Alvin answered on the second ring. "Elaine?" "Yes. I need to remove my name from the mortgage co-signature. She's asked me to leave." A pause. Then his voice again, steady, tired. "Are you sure? I'm not staying in a house where I'm not welcome. I just need you to start the paperwork." "Today?" "Understood. I'll begin the withdrawal process. But once you do this, she'll have 30 days to refinance or the loan goes into default." She wanted freedom, I said. I'm just giving her a taste of it. The motel I found was small, off the highway, with floral curtains and a buzzing light in the bathroom that blinked like an old warning. I laid the suitcase on the bed, unzipped it, and shook my head at the way she'd stuffed everything. No care, no thought. She had folded me out of her life like I was a cluttered napkin on her perfect white table. I made tea in the microwave, too hot. The mug cracked a little as I poured it. She always hated my tea. "It smells like roots," she used to say. Funny, she never minded the roots when I was paying for diapers or cooking meals at 3 a.m. I opened my old notebook, soft cover, lined pages, still filled with Daniel's scribbles from kindergarten, and started to write, not to her, to myself, to remember. Day 1. Banished, not shocked, just finally acknowledged. She wants the house. She wants her version of peace, but the house doesn't belong to her, not fully, not legally, not morally, because the truth was, she'd never been approved for that mortgage alone. At 20, she had wrecked her credit with that accident. The kind they hush up in small towns. The kind where names don't make it into the paper if you know how to ask nicely and pay quietly. I had co-signed everything. I had walked into the bank with trembling hands, lying through my teeth, saying she was responsible, just had a rough patch. No one needed to know about the bleeding passenger, the settlement, the weekly therapy bills she had ignored. I'd made it all disappear, and now she was disappearing me. On the second day, I got a text from her. One sentence: "Don't forget to take your tea kettle and that dusty old mirror." The mirror her grandmother had given me, the one I offered to hang in her hallway. She had rolled her eyes then. "It's too antique, doesn't go with the aesthetic." I stared at her text, deleted it. I made a second call. "Alvin, confirm you've started the paperwork?" "Yes, and the bank will issue formal notification to her in 3-5 business days. Without a guarantor, she'll need to refinance immediately. But given her credit history, she won't be able to," I finished. He hesitated. "Elaine, are you sure this is what you want?" I watched the wind push a leaf across the motel parking lot. She wants to feel free. I'm letting her. Just without my name holding the foundation together. That night I dreamed of the crash. Not the real one, the one I'd imagined, again and again. Where I didn't answer the phone at 2 a.m. Where I let the police handle it. where I didn't cover the lawyer's fees, didn't beg the other mother not to press charges. In that dream, she went to jail. A mugshot, a record, no license, no mortgage. But that's not what happened. What happened was, I showed up, I fixed it, I erased it. I became the invisible scaffolding of her second chance. Now, she wanted a life where I didn't exist, though I disappeared. On paper first, and the rest would follow. On the third day, I packed the kettle, the mirror, my notebook. Then I sat on the motel balcony and waited, not for her to call, not for regret. I waited for the silence to settle into clarity. She didn't need me to explain what was coming. The bank would do that for me. She was 20 when it happened. 20, with a brand new license and a second-hand Honda Civic that still smelled like fast food and cheap cologne. She'd been at a party that night. Nothing wild, just loud music and stronger drinks than she admitted to me later. She swore she was fine to drive, everyone else was more wasted. She was the responsible one, the mom friend. That's what she told the cops. But the tire marks on the road told another story. So did the cracked windshield and the fact that the other car, a family van, had a 5-year-old inside. The child survived. A miracle, the doctor said. But the injuries were serious. Months of recovery, medical bills, and the mother, the woman driving, was relentless. She wanted justice. She wanted blood. I remember the police officer at my door. I remember her hands trembling when they brought her home in cuffs. I remember the hospital waiting room, the smell of antiseptic and despair. And the moment I realized my daughter's life was about to be split in two, before the crash and after. She cried like a child in my lap. "I didn't mean to, Mama. I didn't mean to." And I believed her. She had made a mistake, a terrible one. But I couldn't let that be the end of her. So I did what mothers do. I went to the woman. I brought homemade soup. I brought photos of my daughter as a little girl. I brought money. Every penny I could scrape from the house, insurance, savings, even my retirement. I told her my daughter would never drive again, that she'd never drink again, that she would spend her life making this right. The woman agreed not to press charges. Civil, not criminal, a private settlement, the kind that doesn't make it to courtrooms or newspapers. I saved my daughter from prison, and I never told anyone. She changed after that. At first, she was grateful. I remember her hugging me so tightly it hurt. She brought me flowers. She washed my feet once, while crying, whispering, "I don't deserve you." But slowly, month by month, something hardened inside her. The guilt turned sour. The humility curdled into resentment. I think it embarrassed her, how much I'd seen, how I'd held her when she shook with shame, how I'd seen her at her worst. She started rolling her eyes more, calling my advice old-fashioned, laughing when I used a flip phone, correcting the way I spoke in front of her friends. Once, during dinner with her boyfriend Kyle, she said, "My mom has this thing where she clings to trauma like it's a badge. I swear she's addicted to being needed." I didn't say a word. I just cleared the plates. The older she got, the more she rewrote the story. She told her friends the accident wasn't her fault. The brakes had failed, the weather had been bad. She left out the vodka, the blood, the crying child. She told Kyle she'd paid her dues, that she'd gotten therapy, moved on, that she didn't talk to the toxic people who held her back. I lived in the guest room, cooked the meals, took Kyle Jr. to daycare every day. I paid part of the mortgage, still co-signed under my name. And still, she would introduce me to her co-workers as someone who helps with the kids, not as her mother, not as the reason she still had a future. She stopped calling me Mama, switched to Elaine, said it felt more equal. "You're not just a parent," she once said. "You're also a person. You should live your own life. Stop projecting onto mine." That one stung, not because it was harsh, but because it was rehearsed. Like someone else had said it first, and she'd liked the sound of it. When she threw me out, I didn't protest, because I had done all my fighting years ago, behind closed doors, with bills and courtrooms and whispered deals. And now she wanted a clean slate. I just wondered what she'd do when it was actually clean. Stripped of every name but hers, every safety net, every hand that once caught her before the fall. I left the house without looking back, but in my notebook that night, I wrote, "There is a kind of memory that isn't stored in the mind, but in consequences, and someday she'll meet them. I just hope she's standing when they shake her hand." It was a Thursday, when I saw the photo. I wasn't looking for it. I was just scrolling through my phone, checking the community board for old church friends, when her name popped up, tagged in a post by someone I hadn't seen in years. Janine, her college roommate. She used to sleep on my couch during breaks and eat my banana bread like it was heaven's own recipe. Now she was smiling wide, arm in arm with my daughter, holding a champagne flute in one hand and throwing up a peace sign with the other. The caption read, "To fresh starts and finally cutting the cord. Proud of you, Em. No more dead weight." I stared at it for a long time. The photo had over 200 likes. I clicked through. There were more pictures. Streamers in gold and white, a cake that said, "New Chapter," and a banner across the back wall that read, in glittery script, "Out with the old." Someone had commented, "Wait, is this the mom you used to talk about, the living guilt trip lady?" And underneath, another reply, "She finally kicked the parasite out. Took long enough." There was one that stopped me cold. A close-up of a wine glass, next to a handmade sign with a quote written in fancy calligraphy, "Don't inherit trauma. Burn it." E. My daughter. Her initials. She had made a quote of herself. I sat with the phone in my lap and the air in my lungs going thick and still. It wasn't the cruelty that stung. It was the ease. How easily they laughed. How easily they twisted love into burden, memory into manipulation, me into a cautionary tale. I thought of Kyle Jr., asleep upstairs, in the room I used to rock him in. Did they tell him Grandma left? Did they say I chose to? Or did they not mention me at all? I put the phone down and poured myself a glass of water. Hands steady, breath quiet. Then I picked the phone up again and called my lawyer. "Michael," I said calmly, "I need to move forward with full withdrawal of my name from the mortgage on 1346 Weller Street. Effective immediately." He hesitated. "Elaine? I thought we agreed you'd give her 30 days to prepare." "She's already celebrated. I think she's ready." Silence. "Then, I'll begin drafting the paperwork. She'll receive notice within the week." "Thank you," I said. Then I hung up and sat very still, watching the light fade from the small motel window, like someone dimming a stage. The show was over. Now came the cost. The next day, someone texted me a screenshot. It was from another guest at the party, one I barely remembered. Her post read, "Some people are like mold. They thrive in the dark corners of your life until you shine a light on them, and then they scatter." And the comment beneath it, "You mean her mom, right? Heard she was living off them for years." I didn't reply. I didn't defend myself. What would I say? That I paid the down payment on that house? That I co-signed because my daughter's credit was in the gutter from an accident no one was allowed to mention? That I cleaned their kitchen, paid for the electricity bill 3 times last winter, and walked Kyle Jr. to school every morning because she couldn't function without yoga first? They wouldn't believe it. Or worse, maybe they would and just wouldn't care. Because freedom stories always need a villain. And I was convenient. I walked to the mailbox outside the motel and dropped in a letter addressed to the mortgage lender, then another to the homeowners association, removing my name from emergency contact and shared liability. One last to my daughter. No threats, no guilt. "You have everything you asked for now. I wish you peace and clarity in your new beginning. I am no longer attached to this house, legally, emotionally, or financially. Love." No signature, no phone number, just that. That evening I made myself soup, the kind she always called old lady broth, just bone, ginger, and greens. I ate slowly, the way I used to feed her when she was sick, spoon by spoon, soft and warm. Then I lit a candle. Not for her, but for the part of me that had finally stopped explaining. I didn't need an apology. I didn't want revenge, but I did want her to see what freedom really tasted like. Without a safety net. Without scaffolding. Without me. The envelope came on a Monday. Manila, thick, official. My name typed neatly next to hers. One above, one below. I didn't open it right away. I made tea first. Sat by the window. Let the light hit the envelope like it might melt through the layers and burn the contents before I did. But paper doesn't burn that easily, especially not old paper. I opened it. Inside, copies of the original mortgage agreement, co-signed in my name. My signature on page 3, her messy one on page 4. The amendments, the loan renewal, my guarantee. I flipped through each page like flipping through an old journal I didn't remember writing. Then I called Michael, my lawyer. "She's not going to be able to refinance, is she?" I asked. "No," he said without pause. "Not unless something dramatic has changed in her credit history since last year, which I doubt. She's missed payments? A few. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to trigger red flags. And she defaulted on a small business loan 3 years ago. Remember the cafe she tried to open? He remembered. Mostly the unpaid bills and the employees who called crying when their checks bounced. I covered the final rent, I said softly. I know. I sat with that a moment. Let the silence take shape. She'll have 30 days, I asked. 30 from notice. After that, if the loan isn't refinanced, the bank can begin foreclosure proceedings. And she has no idea. I imagine not, he said carefully. Until that letter shows up. I looked at the open window, the way the wind touched the curtain, just enough to make it move. She had a party, Michael. A party to celebrate kicking me out. I saw, he said. Facebook. Brutal. She's happy, I said. She thinks she's free. Michael didn't speak for a moment. Then in that careful voice lawyers use when they've known you too long, he asked, Elaine, are you absolutely sure you want to go through with this? I didn't answer right away. I walked to the dresser, opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a photo. Her, at 16, with braces and chipped nail polish, holding a school award. Me behind her, hands on her shoulders. She had no idea what I'd already paid for even then. She told people I was a parasite, I said quietly. Michael let out a slow breath. I'm sorry. I don't want to destroy her, Michael, I said. I just want her to understand what I was holding up. There was a long pause. I'll finalize the paperwork, he said gently. Good, I said, then added, as I hung up. She wanted the storm to stop. She forgot I was the one holding the umbrella. It was a plain white envelope, no different than any other, but the seal bore the bank's insignia, and that alone made it heavier than anything I'd carried in years. I wasn't the one to receive it, she was. I only got the message hours later, in the form of a missed call and 5 frantic voicemails. I didn't answer any of them, not right away. I waited until the 6th call, when her voice wasn't shouting anymore, just cracked and desperate. Mom, please. They said it's in default, that you pulled your name from the mortgage, and now the bank is moving to seize it. I didn't think, just call me back, okay? Please? I listened to it 3 times. Then I picked up the phone and dialed back. She answered on the first ring. What did you do? She spat, raw panic leaking from every syllable. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't apologize. I did what you asked, I said calmly. I removed myself from your life. This isn't funny, Mom. I'm not laughing. You're punishing me? Just because I asked you to move out? No, I said. I'm not punishing you. I'm simply letting the truth breathe. And the truth is, you never could afford that house on your own. There was a pause, the kind of pause that swells before someone either sobs or explodes. You're unbelievable, she hissed. You always said this was about family, that you were helping, and now you're taking it all back. I'm not taking, I replied. I'm stepping aside. There's a difference. You're ruining me. No, I said quietly. You did that part. I just stopped shielding you from it. Silence. Then, bitterly, you're just doing this to get even, to make a point. I already made my point, I said. The day I signed those bank papers for you, after you nearly killed a child and buried your own future. I made my point when I cleaned up your mess and never spoke a word of it. She was breathing heavy now. You think you're righteous? You think this makes you noble? I think this makes me honest. I'll fight this, she snapped. I'll take it to court. You'll regret this. I let the words hang there, so hollow they didn't even echo. Then I guess, I said softly, we should both be ready to tell the whole story. I've already submitted the accident records, the settlements, the signed confession. You wouldn't, she whispered. I already did. A click, silence. The next morning, I walked down to the courthouse myself. Not because I needed to, because I wanted to look the clerk in the eye when I submitted the last envelope. Inside were photocopies of everything I'd buried for over a decade. The police report, the insurance settlement, the medical bills from the child's family, and the statement my daughter wrote by hand, back when she was still honest, still scared, still aware she'd done something wrong. She had signed it in blue ink. I signed mine in black. I didn't do it to destroy her. I did it because the system she was threatening to manipulate, the court, the mortgage, the sympathy of a judge, deserved to know what it was dealing with. She wanted to paint me as a vengeful old woman. I was just someone who remembered, and paper doesn't forget. A week later, the notice went up on the house. Foreclosure in 30 days. Bank inspection pending. She called again. I let it go to voicemail. Mom, they're putting a notice on the door. I need to talk to you. Please, I have kids. I don't know where we're going to go. This can't be happening. That was the first time she used the word we. Before, it had always been me, my space, my future. Now it was we. I didn't call back. Instead, I sat on the porch of my rented room, folded a letter into an envelope, and addressed it to her oldest, Kyle. Inside, a note. Dear sweetheart, I'm sorry you have to move again. It's not your fault. Grown-ups make mistakes, and sometimes they take a long time to learn from them. You are loved, you are strong, and you're not alone. Love, Grandma. No bitterness, no mention of the house, just love. The kind that doesn't demand a return on investment. When the bank moved forward with the lockout, I watched the news footage online. They never said her name, just showed a nondescript suburban home with a white door, a foreclosure notice flapping in the wind. I recognized the porch. I recognized the wind chime I'd hung myself, now tangled and silent, and I whispered, "You once called me your shelter. I only stepped aside so you could see what rain really feels like." The courtroom was cold, not by temperature, but by presence. Cold in the way marble floors always are, no matter the season. Cold in the way a judge looks over her glasses at two women who used to be mother and daughter. She sat across from me, my daughter, disheveled and shaking, her cheeks blotched with anger and exhaustion. The lawyer she'd scraped together at the last minute flipped papers without meeting her eye, and in the middle of it all sat Kyle Jr., 7 years old, shoes too small, hands folded, not crying, just watching, always watching. Given the current foreclosure, the judge began, and the lack of a stable residence, the court must determine a temporary guardian for the child. Her lawyer jumped in. "Your Honor, my client is actively seeking alternative housing. This is a temporary setback." I didn't speak. "Not yet," the judge continued. "Emily, Morrison has filed a petition for emergency guardianship, citing lack of housing, previous care duties, and established relationship with the child. Supporting documentation includes school pickup records, medical authorizations, and character references." My daughter snapped. "She's trying to steal him from me." "No," I said, calmly, quietly. Her eyes burned into mine. "You want to take everything? My home, now my child?" "I didn't take your home," I said. "The bank did. I just stopped protecting you from the truth." She stood, voice cracking. "Don't do this. Please. He's all I have left." "He's not a possession," I replied. "He's a child, and he deserves a safe place to sleep." She crumpled. Not like a villain, not like a fighter, like a daughter who had used up all her excuses and found no one left to believe them. "I'm begging you," she whispered. "Don't take him from me." I looked at the judge, then at Kyle Jr., and said, "I'm not taking him. I'm holding him until she can." The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Morrison, do you intend to seek permanent custody?" I shook my head. "No, Your Honor. I want her to get on her feet, but until then, someone needs to keep him from the cold." My daughter sobbed, shaking her head. The judge nodded once. "Emergency guardianship is granted to Ms. Morrison for a period of 90 days, with review every 30 days, visitation to be supervised until housing is secured." The gavel fell. Just like that, I became what I already was, the safe place. In the hallway after the ruling, she sat slumped on a bench. I approached slowly. No triumph in my step, just gravity. "I didn't do this to hurt you," I said softly. She didn't look up. "I didn't do this to win." Silence. "I did it because when I held you as a baby, you were this small too. And someone had to fight for you when you couldn't." Still no reply. I crouched down, leveled my voice. "I'm not your enemy, but I won't let your child become your excuse." Her shoulders shook. Whether it was with grief or shame, I couldn't tell. I stood and walked away. Behind me I heard her whisper, "Will he hate me?" I turned back. "No," I said, "but he will remember who held his hand when the storm came." It began with a blog post, not from a reporter, not from a tabloid, from a woman I barely remembered. Her name was Laurel, I think, who had been the aunt of the little boy injured in the crash all those years ago. She posted it on her personal blog. No venom, no clickbait, just a quiet recollection, written with trembling compassion. "There was once a child in our family who didn't walk for almost a year because a girl, newly 20, drove drunk and hit his mother's car. The girl cried in court. Her mother paid everything off, covered it all up. We stayed silent, for the boy's sake. But now, I see that girl on Instagram, celebrating her freedom from the very woman who saved her. And I can't be silent anymore. Within hours, it spread like brushfire. Screenshots, threads, retweets, hashtags. People started digging. The foreclosure was public record. So were the court documents now. The truth, wrapped in years of silence and legal red tape, was suddenly unraveling before the world like yarn from a broken spool. And my daughter, who had built a brand around healing, coaching, empowerment, and breaking generational trauma, was exposed. Every quote she'd ever posted, every wellness video, every podcast about moving beyond the past, now sat beneath a mountain of comments like, "You mean the past where you nearly killed a child? How do you teach healing when you destroyed the one person who healed you?" The audacity to host a freedom party while living in a house your mother paid for. She disabled the comments. Then she deleted the videos. Then the sponsors pulled out. Her brand collapsed. Workshops were canceled. Clients left in waves. She tried to post an apology, some vague, tearful live video about narratives and mental health, but it only made it worse. Because the internet, for all its cruelty, has a nose for lies. And no apology works when it comes years after the sin and only 5 minutes after getting caught. The press reached out to me. First it was a local paper, then a bigger one. Then a news anchor left a voicemail offering a televised interview. I declined them all, not because I was afraid, because I had already spoken once and enough. In paperwork, in custody, in silence. One reporter showed up at my door. "Don't you want to set the record straight?" he asked. "Tell your side of the story." I smiled. "This is not a story," I said. "This is a life, and I'm still living it." He didn't understand. He thought I was being evasive, but I was just being free. She called me 3 days after the blog post went viral. Voice hoarse, broken. "They're calling me a monster." I said nothing. I didn't know she was still alive. That woman, Laurel. "She's lying, right?" "No," I said gently. "She's remembering. But I've changed. I've grown. That was years ago. And so was your gratitude." She sniffled. "I was going to tell the truth one day. You had 100 chances." "What do I do now?" she whispered. I paused. Then I said, "You let this storm pass through you. You sit in the mess, and you finally see it." She was silent for a long time. "Then do you hate me?" I closed my eyes. "No," I said. "But I can't protect you from this. I already saved you from one accident. This one? This is yours to survive." She hasn't posted since. Some say she left the state. Some say she changed her name. I don't know. I don't look. Because the truth isn't a weapon. It's a window. And when someone refuses to open it themselves, sometimes the wind comes in anyway. I sat on the opposite side of the street, teacup in hand, steam curling into the morning air. The cup was chipped on one side, a faded tulip, soft green handle, but it still held warmth, still held weight. The house stood across from me, its windows boarded, a red and white sign staked into the lawn. Temporary auction, final notice. The grass had grown wild, untamed, like it had stopped pretending to be part of a home and started becoming part of the land again. The porch, paint peeled like old skin. The wind chime I once hung above the front step, little blue ceramic bells, lay tangled and silent, clinking now only when the breeze pitied it. Beside me, Kyle Jr. knelt on the pavement, chalk in hand, tongue sticking slightly out of his mouth as he scribbled bright shapes across the concrete. Stars, suns, a crooked little house with smoke curling from a heart-shaped chimney. He didn't know today was the auction. He didn't need to. To him, it was just another sunny morning, another cup of tea with Grandma, another sidewalk becoming a canvas, another stretch of ordinary, soft, and safe. I sipped slowly, letting the warmth settle deep in my chest, letting it touch the places where cold used to live. Quiet, lingering cold that no furnace can reach. The kind left behind when someone you love rewrites you in their story as the villain. But villains don't carry broken cups. Villains don't make tea before dawn for 7-year-olds who still talk in their sleep. No one clapped that morning. No reporters showed. No neighbors peeked out their windows in awe. No one pulled over to ask for my version of events, or handed me a medal, or even said you were right. There was no parade for the woman who stayed silent while the world misunderstood her. And that was fine, because today wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about victory. It was about return, about placing truth back where it belonged, not in headlines, not in hashtags, but in the quiet space where a child draws with chalk and a woman lets go of pain, in the stillness between the past and the future, where dignity lives. A man in a navy suit arrived at the house, clipboard under arm. He unlocked the door, clipped paperwork to the mailbox, and placed a fresh sign on the lawn. Auction in progress, cash buyers only. He never noticed me. That was fine too. I wasn't here to be seen. I looked down at my grandson's latest masterpiece. He'd drawn a little figure next to the house. Curly hair, wide dress, a steaming cup in one hand. "Who's that?" I asked, sipping. He smiled. "That's you. You're watching the house." I nodded. "I suppose I am." He handed me the yellow chalk. "Draw something?" I thought for a moment. Then, beside his house, I drew an umbrella. He blinked. "What's that for?" "In case it rains," I said. He nodded seriously. "Smart," and kept drawing. We sat that way for an hour, maybe more. Just two people making something beautiful on cracked cement in front of a house that once pretended to hold a family. I remembered birthdays in that living room. Cakes baked late, candles melted too fast. I remembered crying into dish towels, muffling the sound so the baby wouldn't hear. I remembered laughter too, the good kind, the kind that doesn't know yet that it will become rare. And I remembered the silence, the long, slow withdrawal of affection, the way my daughter started closing doors, started using my first name, started replacing love with logistics. And still, I stayed. Not because I didn't know better, but because sometimes we hold broken things gently, hoping they'll forget how to cut. He tugged my sleeve. "Grandma, what happens if no one buys the house?" I smiled. "Then it'll wait until someone is ready." He paused, thoughtful. "Are houses sad when they're empty?" I looked at the windows, at the shutters sealed tight. "No," I said. "They're just quiet, like people who need rest." He nodded slowly. "Okay," then went back to drawing. I didn't stay to see who bought it. Didn't care whether it went to a young couple or a developer or no one at all, because that house was never mine. Not really. It was a debt paid, a shelter built, a chapter closed. I had walked its rooms in silence and sacrifice. I had held back storms no one saw. I had stitched over cracks with my own name, but I didn't belong to it, and it didn't belong to me. I once held back a storm for my daughter. Today, I simply let it rain. Not because I wanted her to drown, but because sometimes the only way to learn to swim is to be left standing in the water alone. I set the teacup beside the chalk drawings, stood slowly, brushed off my skirt. "Come on, sweetheart," I said. "Time to go." He looked up. "Can we come back?" "Maybe," I said, "but this story's done now." And he nodded, because somehow, at 7, he already understood what endings felt like. We walked away, hand in hand, past the auction sign, past the curb, past the old wind chime that finally sang again, just once, as the wind picked up. If you've ever been pushed out of your own life, if someone once looked you in the eye and said, "You're holding us back," like your years of love were something shameful, if you've been labeled a burden in the very home you helped build, if your silence was mistaken for weakness, your patience for irrelevance, and your age for expiration, then let me tell you something that no one else will. Truth doesn't shout. It survives. It weathers every storm of denial, every insult dressed as modern thinking, every dismissal spoken through clenched jaws and closed doors. Truth lives quietly, inside the woman who remembers the names of everyone she's ever forgiven. Inside the grandmother who once rocked a child to sleep, while someone else took the credit for keeping the lights on. Inside the quiet one in the room who watched, listened, and never forgot. This is Grandma True Stories, a place for the voices the world tried to outgrow, not to cry for pity, not to scream for vengeance, but to speak, finally, with clarity. Here, we tell the truth others were too loud to hear, the truths about betrayal, carried for decades without witness, the truths about sacrifice, what was given, what was taken, and what was never returned, the truths about dignity, silence, and survival, the truths we never wrote down because we were too busy cleaning the table everyone else ate from. If you're here, it means you're ready. Ready to listen to the stories that don't make the news. Stories whispered in the kitchen after the kids go to bed. Stories remembered on porches, in rocking chairs, with hands that tremble but voices that do not. Some of these stories will make you cry, some will make you angry, and some, if you've ever been forgotten, dismissed, or underestimated, will feel like coming home. So if you believe that silence holds power, that wisdom doesn't need volume to be heard. If you know in your bones that some truths take years to bloom, then subscribe to Grandma True Stories, because some stories are born in storms, but end in light. And some women don't get the last word, they get the final truth.